Hi there, welcome to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast with me, John Hill, the running podcast for the over 35s with Marathon Dreams. Episode 18, The Curse of Should. Now, what's going on with me at the moment? Right, so I have finished my Hyrox, as we know, and I've been recovering from that, and I've just started upping the miles a little bit, just seeing how we get on, because obviously I've got marathon training starting on the 25th of November for the Great Welsh Marathon, which is my spring marathon in March next year. And it's going all right, actually. I did a good run this morning as I record this, a 10-miler at a decent-ish pace. Felt good, so I'll just go on how I feel, which is going to be one of the themes of what I talk about today. So I felt good, and I did my 10 miles this morning, and I've done a few more miles this week because I just love running, to be honest. And I miss it a lot when I do the high-intense stuff for Hyrox, because it's my happy place, especially this time of year when it's a bit cooler and you've got a bit more flexibility in the times you go out because it's not as warm. So I do enjoy the autumnal season, and obviously I'm quite fortunate to be able to go on some quite leafy and scenic routes around here. So it's very good indeed. Right, so also a few things have been happening recently. So we've seen a few world records go, as I noticed. So the women's marathon record went in Chicago. The half marathon men's record went, as I record this a few weeks ago, at 57 something, which is ridiculous. And it's just showing that the performance level is increasing massively. And actually, funny enough, I was listening to Marathon Talk, which is a very good podcast, which I highly recommend that you listen to. And they were talking about the incremental increase in the female performance on running distance versus the male, and how females have accelerated a lot quicker than men have in terms of breaking records and things like that, which I thought was quite interesting. So I would recommend giving those guys a listen at Marathon Talk. It's a very good podcast. Even if you're not interested in running marathons, it's certainly good to listen to. So what's the curse of should then? Should we get into that? Okay, so as you know from listening to this and probably following me on Instagram, 12 Months to Marathon, don't forget to hop over there and drop me a follow. I'm not very big on dogma, and I don't think that we should get too pigeonholed by certain things, or we should get overly technical with our running, particularly if we're not in an athletic space. Okay, so what do I mean by that? I don't think that the average person who, say, for example, wants to run a half marathon or a marathon and really push themselves beyond their potential needs to get overly technical. I think the first port of call for me has always been the mindset and understanding what's actually required to do a marathon. Because I've seen some stuff recently and people have shared things with me about this, how to cheat the system and run a marathon. And I think these things work well in theory, but in practice, they're not practical, because I saw one which said you only needed to run up to 9 miles, I think, in training to run a marathon, and I don't physically see how that's possible in terms of getting you ready from a mindset point of view. So I think for a lot of us, our mindset and how we approach not only the training but also the race itself is the most important thing, and that's kind of where the curse of should comes in, because the curse of should is that while should is a very commonly used word in the English language, it's often not very beneficial, because it gets us caught up in things that we could have done or should have done but we didn't do. And it also, and a question I get asked a lot is, should I be doing this? Now, the problem with should I be doing this is, if what you're doing is currently working and you've absorbed something on the internet, or you've gone into a Facebook group and been led down the garden path, it can knock you off course of doing something you enjoy. So, for example, if you currently run at a certain pace, at a certain distance, and you're happy with both of those things, and somebody says you should be running faster will diminish your enjoyment of running potentially and make you hate running, which defeats the object of doing it in the first place. That's a good example of should. Another example of should is when people have said to me in the past, you should be running more miles for marathon training. Now, when I did my sub 3, the plan that I follow, my maximum mileage week was 64 miles with a lot of pace work, yeah? So someone said to me, a few people said to me, you should be doing 80, 90 miles. I'm like, well, my largest pace week was 64. Distance, was 64, and I did sub 3 quite comfortably in the end, and I did a couple more marathons that were very close to a sub 3, a 302 and a 303, and the 303 was, I let myself down a little bit in the final 10k, And I also did London at 3:07 without doing a really much speed work in training. And still, my biggest mileage week was still 64 or 65 miles. So I'm not saying you, pun intended, should do less miles. I'm just saying you have to do what works for you. And you can't get led astray by the shoulds, because there's too much information out there. I get this a lot with my coaching community and my coaching group, and I have conversations all the time, and I say, look, my goal here is to help you achieve your goals. It's not to enforce what I believe onto you or say you should be doing this or should be doing Y, because for me, a lot of what you find out with running is experimentation and getting out and doing the miles and actually seeing what goes on and seeing how you feel. Because you've got to bear in mind that people didn't always have tech, we didn't always have watches, we didn't always have tracking apps. So what did we do before that? People weren't running around checking their pulse, were they, to say what heart rate zone am I in? They were just running, and they just run how they felt. And these improvements are great, again, at probably an athletic level, but I don't think they're helping the average person, because the average person needs to understand how they feel and be comfortable with themselves and be comfortable with how they perform. And if you're just looking to get around a marathon, I don't think the excessive technical elements are your main concern. I think the main concern is how you feel, number one, how comfortable you are with yourself, and how much courage you have to know you can A, follow the training plan, and B, get the job done. So if people are bombarding you with shoulds all the time, it's not a great way to be, okay? So I think you just have to be a little bit careful when people, or you, for example, if you read something, think, should I be doing that? You need to really ask yourself a question. Is what I'm doing working? Is the plan that I'm following working? Yeah, and if it is, great. If it's not, then you need to change it, because it's easy to get caught up with dogma. So here's another example, and I'm going to talk about this in a bit more depth. If you're using a running app and you're the type of person that's very self-motivated and very self-sufficient, then a running app is great because you'll just follow it. Like with me, I can literally print off a free running plan off the internet and follow it. Now, if I wanted to next level my performance, I'd probably get a coach. And to be honest, in the Hyrox arena, I've been tempted to get a coach loads of times. So I'm like, I'm missing something here. I need some more guidance because I want to get better. And it's only potentially me being stubborn because I'm already a coach myself that makes me want to do it. But in running terms, I know I can follow a running plan, so I'm very self-sufficient. So if you gave me a running app, I would probably follow it. But if you're the type of person that you're not very self-motivated and self-sufficient, but you do want to do a marathon, then perhaps you need some extra help. And shoulding yourself to death isn't going to really help you. So that's the first thing I want to say about the curse of should. The second thing about the curse of should is, when you achieve something or do something, it's done, okay? It doesn't matter what should have happened, okay? It's done, and you can only learn from it. And there is no failure, there's only feedback, okay, which I mentioned before. So it's about what happens next. Now, I put a post on my Instagram the other day which said, I don't think you're only as good as your last run, I think you're only as good as your next run. Because that's what makes the difference. You can learn from your past and you can analyse your past and you can review your past performance, but you're only as good, in my opinion, as your next run, because that's the one that matters the most. So put all your energy and focus into that. Shoulding yourself isn't going to help you. I should have done better. I should have run faster. I should have done this. Shoulds aren't the main thing. Now, when I finished Hyrox, because that's my most recent event, I shoulded myself. I should have gone faster than that. I should have performed better than that. But the truth was, I didn't do that for a reason. And the feedback was the fact that I was injured and I couldn't run as fast as I would have liked. So that's a performance thing, like I mentioned on the last podcast. So there's no point shoulding myself. I can just go, well, actually, what do I need to improve on? And I've made some improvements already from that experience that have said, actually, if I'd have done that, I would have performed better. So now I know for future. So now I know what to integrate into my next marathon training cycle to make me better from an endurance point of view, if that makes sense. But shoulding myself constantly isn't really going to help. I should have. And I remember somebody in particular in my life, I won't go into too much detail, who loved the shoulds. We'd sit there for ages going, well, you should have done this. Doesn't matter. It's done. The past is gone. You can only focus on the future. The past is to be learned from. Life is to be lived forwards. Yes, you can review, but you've got to make sure you don't get caught up in your own head and literally go into that should cycle and end up causing yourself a load of problems. You've got to just take a step back, take a breath and say, okay, what do I need to do next time? Yes? So that's the second side of should. So just to bring this into a big ball for you, I think there's two sides to the curse of should that's a problem. Okay, the first problem is when you are doing something and you think you should be doing something else. Okay, because somebody said it. Yeah. Now, unless that's a coach who's giving you concise advice, that's different. But if it's on the internet or you're just reading information, don't change something that works. And if something's not working, make sure that the advice you get is proper advice and is going to help you, because just getting advice from random strangers, as I've said before, isn't the way. That's why I don't do it with people, because here's the problem. Here's the problem. If you give somebody, I've said this before, if you give somebody advice it doesn't really help them, because if they've got no skin in the game to follow it, there's no investment, so why are they going to follow it? Yeah. And then you're going to get caught up in shoulds. So I speak to people all the time who say to me on the phone or on Instagram for messages, they'll say, well, what should I be doing? It's a very difficult question to answer, because you don't know the person. You need to know a full picture. Now, if you're coaching somebody officially, you've then got a full picture of what they're doing and a vested interest. They've got a vested interest in you because they're investing in your coaching, and you've got an invested interest in them because they're your client. So then you've got a pathway. But even then, you don't get caught up in shoulds. You get caught up in, well, what you're trying to do, here's some guidance, try it, come back and feedback. That's not should, that's feedback and review. So the second side of should is focusing too much on the past and saying, I should have done better there, I should have ran faster, I should have ran further. It doesn't matter. What's the lesson and what do you need to do next time on the next one? Because here's the thing, and I had this conversation in our running community a few weeks ago. If you miss a week of training in a 16-week trial, 16-week cycle for a marathon, and you complete the marathon after the 16 weeks, you're not going to turn around and go, oh yeah, but I should have done that extra week. It doesn't matter. You've achieved your goal. That's all that matters, is the end product and you achieving your goal. That is all that matters. So you need to be very, very, very careful around should and the cursive should. It's not useful, and it's not a very useful word. So if you're finding yourself getting caught up in excessive shoulds, have a check and a quick check on yourself and just say, right, what am I actually trying to do here? What are my goals, and what's the best way for me to get there and achieve those goals? And normally that's with concise advice or concise information that's going to get you executing and learning from the actions that you take, not wrapping yourself up in knots because of what you should have done. Yeah? So focus on the future. Don't focus on what should have happened, and don't bombard yourself with information. If you're in the marathon place, marathons are quite straightforward to do. Not easy, but straightforward in terms of the process. It's a 16-week training plan which you need to follow. You need to make, there are certain things during that training plan that have to happen to make the race a lot easier, and there are certain things you need to do with nutrition. And nutrition's a big area. You know, it takes a lot of research and experimentation to get nutrition right. And certainly information and shoulds can really knock you off track there. So nutrition's, something you need to experiment with. Nobody can just give it you there and just say do that. It's an experimentation thing. So let's not get caught up in shoulds, folks. Let's not look at the past excessively in terms of what we should have done. Let's focus on what happened, what feedback did we get, and how can we improve in future. And let's get the minimum possible information we need to take the maximum possible action, and then you will achieve the results you want. And if you do want any help, fantastic, please reach out. 12 Months to Marathon on Instagram. Drop me a follow when you're there for all your daily content and tips. And if you do want to have a chat about coaching, I'm more than happy to discuss it with you. And look, if it's not for you, fine, at least you reached out. So yeah, that's episode 18. Thank you very much for listening, as always, to the 12 Months to Marathon podcast. The curse of should. I could go on for ages about this, but I won't, because I like to keep this in nice bite-sized chunks, like I've said before. So again, don't forget, hop over to Instagram, 12 Months to Marathon, drop me a follow or a message there if you need to. Thank you very much for listening. I appreciate it. Don't forget to like and share this podcast wherever you get your podcast from. Drop a love heart on it, share it with your friends, share it on socials. If you know anybody that would benefit from this, I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support, lovely comments that I get, and people say to me all the time how much what I'm doing here is making a difference, which means the world to me. So thank you very much for that. I appreciate you all. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you all very soon.